we have this AP story from Jenna Fryer. I'll read you the headline. NASCAR aware of allegations a team engineer stole intellectual property to give to a rival team. And in the article, it basically says the engineer is in a contract year with Joe Gibbs Racing, according to executives with 6 teams who spoke with the AP on condition of anonymity because the details are considered private and have not been disclosed publicly. Joe Gibbs Racing, which has 2 cars still competing for the Cup title, declined to comment. So we're talking about here proprietary information. And you always hear stories from back in the day. I want to hear from you. Back in your day, maybe there were some guys who were helping each other out, helping teams out with chassis setup and all that. But now this is a billion-dollar industry with NASCAR. These are teams that are worth multi-million dollars. These charters are worth whatever it is, $40 million. This is a no-no. So this is a pretty big deal when you're sharing info with another team, even if it's a team that's not in the playoffs here. What do you think?
Charlie, yeah, if we go back, man, this is a big deal. But I mean, when I first read about it, and I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, ain't no big deal. Hell, this stuff goes on all the time, right? And it used to go on all the time, folks. This crap went on all the time. You would steal a crew member to get the information. This has always gone on. But in those days when it was going on, I mean, the guy would change teams. Or really, I'm going to tell you something. A lot of what used to go on this kind of stuff, all these guys know each other, and a lot of them are buddies. They'd go out partying. They'd be at the racetrack, and they'd go out partying on a Friday or Saturday night. And everybody get to having a good time and drinking. And, it would be a crew member or whoever with a team, and that team is kicking butt, and he'd maybe get a little bit inebriated, and he'd start running his mouth. He'd start talking. He would give up, what his team was doing. That stuff, and the other teams do this, and other teams would, all right, we can get something out of Mikey there, but we got to give him 3 shots of Fireball and one Jack and Coke, and that's but no more than that. We got to get the information right at that point, and it was it was almost a science with these guys as far as getting information. And guys would be buddies on pit road, and they would just talk, and somebody be down in the dumps and need some help or something, and somebody would, backdoor give him a little piece of paper that had some information on it. I mean, I've seen this stuff. I've watched it. I know about it, right? And but Charlie, everything you just said about where we're at with the sport right now, these guys weren't under contract. They weren't under non-disclosure contracts, those types of things. I would assume, and in fact, I know I've heard a lot of these guys that are with these teams are under contract. They can't talk about stuff, right? For fear of under penalty of the law, something. And I'll tell you something about Gibbs. It's remarkable, or it's funny about Gibbs. This comes from Gibbs because I'm gonna tell you something. I've always felt they're the most, how can I say this, secret organization or information kept within that organization. And I'm going to tell you something. This goes back when they started that team with Jimmy Makar. Everybody remembers Jimmy Makar. He was the first crew chief for Joe Gibbs back in the 90s. He's married to Patty Makar. Patty's did Jarrett's daughter. But anyhow, Jimmy was very, very, he's a good guy, dear friend of mine, but you couldn't get information out of that boy if you hung him by his toes. He wouldn't, other guys you could be butting around with, and you talk a little bit about chassis or car. Even after I retired, even after I was out of the sport, and I would show up at the racetrack, and I'd go find Jimmy at his truck, and we'd sit there. I mean, I know 2 or 3 times we sat there for an hour longer at the back of the tow rig, just talking, right? Talking about stuff. I would bring up anything about the car, downforce or anything. He tight-lipped. He wouldn't say a word. It was the damnedest thing. He was probably the most tight-lipped guy in the sport that I ever met in my life. And that philosophy, he spread through Joe Gibbs Racing, right? And they're just, you don't get information out of that group. And for this to happen to that group is like, damn, of all groups for this to happen to him, like, man. So but for somebody to do it for financial gains, never knew many people. I knew people would do it. They would do it for career gain. They would go to another team and and they would share the information they had. But for somebody to just buy and pay for information from that team, That's not right, Charlie. That is what we call downright dirty. All right. That's just dirty ass politics in our sport. That if you're doing it for monetary gain, no, you need to be kicked out of the sport. You need to be whatever it is you do. Now, the other part of this is I see on social media people it said NASCAR knows about it and aware of it. This ain't NASCAR's deal. People raising hell about NASCAR and this has nothing to do with NASCAR, right? Because there you get this gets into this is not a franchise type deal. These are independent contractors. What goes on between those teams has nothing to do with NASCAR. They have no stats to rule on this. Okay, so they just need to be left out of this conversation totally.
It's funny because you brought up back in the day, maybe getting the guy drunk, getting him a couple shots, and
Yeah.
I want to read a couple paragraphs real quick from this article. So it says, this is Jenna Fryer, AP. The engineer had been exploring options with other teams as the season draws to a close. Multiple team officials told the AP on Sunday, confirming they discussed possible employment. So this guy obviously maybe looking to get a job with a different team. NASCAR acknowledged to AP it has heard that one team with no cars in the playoffs paid the engineer cash in exchange for setup information. So there was money exchanged. And as you were talking, I was kind of laughing because don't you think there's a difference? Like if a couple guys are at a bar and they're like, yeah, we got Vegas coming up. What are you looking at setup wise? They start drinking. Yeah, do this, do that. Right. That's different. That's kind of the good old boys. That's what's always been done. Now, if you're downloading a data file and you're emailing it or passing it along and you're paying money, that feels dirtier. But it's kind of funny because it's like this has always been done, but now you're getting money. And I'm sure it was done in a more technological way than just a couple guys at a bar. But
Yeah.
at the core, it's kind of what NASCAR has always been about a little bit, right?
Yeah.
As you said.
Yeah, it is, right? And I mean, you're exactly right, Charlie. I mean, I know, we get into, again, it's like the antitrust thing. We're a few levels above Rick Mast
Mm-hmm.
right now on all this stuff and what the ramifications are. But yeah, it's still dude, if you're exploring your options for next year to change and go to another team, that's fine. You do all that. You don't give up the intellectual properties of what you're doing. You just don't do that. It's not, you know, but yeah, to the core, it really is. It goes back to kind of what we always did a little bit of what guys have always done, but just not for financial gain, then. Just that's the kicker. For actual cash money, nah. And I don't know why NASCAR even said, yeah, we know about it. I don't even know why they would even comment on it. If it'd been me, NASCAR, I said, no, we don't know what you're talking about. Right.
So, car guy here asked a good question. Would the Gibbs setup info work on a Ford and GM? So, a Ford or a Chevy, or would that be Toyota only, you think?
No, it would work. It would work across the board.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the fascia, a little bit of the greenhouse difference in these cars, the body styles, the fascia, and the tailpiece, but they're all regulated. They're all so close. Anything you do on one is gonna work on the other ones. Now, in the past, probably it wouldn't be that way as much because the aerodynamics, the down forces, side forces, all the geometric forces of everything you're doing because you're a different manufacturer. Yeah, it maybe would work, but no, that's a good question, and it would work. It'll cross pollinate across all the platform of all the OEMs.